Welcome back, and I mean welcome back. We are back home after 2 weeks of Florida time, and Florida has its own timeline. I swear, a mile in Florida is half a mile in Arkansas because it takes forever to get anywhere down there. So I'm kind of glad to be back in Arkansas. It was cold the first week. We got 1 day of testing instead of the 3 that we hoped for. I mean, they couldn't run cars down the track. And then we got a week of sick week, and we came out second in our class, and I don't remember, 6th or 7th overall. We didn't have a very good time getting down the tracks with the car, but we had a 6 every day except the last day where we hurt something. We don't even know what we hurt, or Alex doesn't know what she hurt.
No.
We're not sure yet. Anyway, she was working hard to get the car down the track the last day in South Georgia, and it would just spin. The track was so sticky, it was just not a track for a big tire car. Finally, on the third pass, she said, this is going to be a really bad pass. I'm going to pull a bunch of timing out of this thing. We're going to get it away from the starting line, and then we'll see what happens. It actually did really well. It went away. It had a decent 60-foot time. It was on course to be a good 6-second pass. She shifted to second, and boom, it popped. Blue flames out the side. So something let go. We're not exactly sure what, because the odd thing is she drove it back from the top end of the track. It clunked a little bit, I guess.
I'll turn it around. We can talk about that.
It clunked a little bit, I guess, and she was still able to drive it back, and we drove it into the trailer. So we're getting ready to unload it, put it all back in its place, put it up on the lift, and see if I can figure out what let go. But something's broken the drivetrain. So let's get this thing unloaded and figure it out.
So the 55 definitely gaslit me. It acted like it was broke, and then it didn't act broke after I was driving it back. So
something's broke.
Something is broke. So like Dad was saying on that second pass, like it was a 126, or third pass was 120 60 foot, which sounds slow, but we've ran 670s. It was like a 119 60 foot. So it was like finally moving, and then I shifted it, and it just went into basically neutral, but then it let me drive off, and like Dad said, it clunk, 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 clunked, and then all of a sudden it just stopped making noise, and it didn't make noise the rest of the night.
Okay, so this is kind of a cool place for our followers here to let's have a little contest. What do we think it is based on the description? So the car launched. She pulled a bunch of timing out of it. It didn't have the power that it normally has. We did hurt a gear vendor earlier in the week, right in the burnout box. It just, the sprag let go, so it wasn't a big deal. It did an RPM, but we'll describe this pass. So all the other passes all week were with a lot more power than what you had when it broke. And this is a second gear vendor. This is one that we had in the trailer as a spare that had been proven, and we just changed it out for a new one. Yeah,
so I left, and like I said, the car is finally working, which something interesting is on a radial track, we're figuring out that the 55 actually gets too much wheel speed, which is almost backwards of any thinking. But so we were trying to kill wheel speed, so I pulled a bunch of timing. I think I decided to pull like 12 degrees, and then when about the time that the timing was coming back in would have been right about the time of the 1-2 shift. 2 seconds into the pass is when all the timing came back. And at the 1-2 shift, I was really confident because like the car was hooked up, it was moving, I heard the timing pull out, come back in, 1-2 shift, and it was like car went to the rev limiter. You can see that in the data. And then it also, like I tried to give it throttle and there was no noise, but it was like halfway in neutral. Like it was like really lugging. It felt like it was slipping gears, like or slipping clutches.
Ugh, that's scary.
But it didn't, because then driving back, I always go through, check first, second, third gear pressure, looking at pressures. Transmission pressures were good. Transmission pressures were good during the pass, and it made like sounds like it was the rear end turning out, because it happened when I was turning. I was like clunk, clunk, clunk. But then all of a sudden, hang on, one more point. As I would take off under load, like, really early, like try to take off, it would make a clunk, 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 clunk. But then as soon as I get some RPM in the car and drive away, it didn't clunk anymore. And then all of a sudden, everything stopped making noise. There's no slop in the rear end. There's no noise from the transmission. So what is it?
So it's one of probably 4 things. It's going to be ring and pinion, which will start at the very back. And the only reason we'd say that's a 10-inch ring and pinion pro gear. This is the stoutest we can put in that car without some triple Steve Morris thing. So, which we don't need. So I don't think it's the ring and pinion, because if it lets a tooth go, it could be one tooth broke off the ring and pinion. It could have got jammed in there and it spit it out. It's possible.
It is, but that doesn't really make it feel neutral.
No, that part doesn't make sense. Unless it was, well, no, none of that makes sense. But we're going to pull the rear end because it's got several races on it.
And it's time to like refresh that anyways. We usually try to refresh it every race. But this time it's got 2 drag weeks plus a bunch of, or like 2 drag and drives plus a bunch of testing.
Okay, the other possibility moving forward could be the glue in the drive shaft. We smoked one of those once before, and what happens is the glue that glues the billet aluminum into the carbon tube could slip. That would explain the neutral part. It doesn't explain the clunking, except once you unphase a drive shaft, you got U-joints crossed like this instead of like this, you could have some kind of weird harmonic happening.
Good point.
So I don't think that's it, because I mean, if it slipped to the point that it hit the rev limiter, I think it would have just been dead.
Toasted.
But you did
But we
it before.
did that in the burnout. So that could be. That is a very possible something.
We did that once before. She did her burnout and backed up. I don't remember. Went to launch.
No, I broke it on the pass before. We didn't realize it. And then when I went to do my burnout, it just finally let go of all the glue. And it just annihilated
once it let go, it smoked the drive shaft. I mean, it just spun the aluminum in the tube so hard. So it's rear end, possible. It could have broke one tooth, say, it jammed in between the teeth and it clunked and it finally spit that out. Possible. It could be the joint, like I say, it could have unphased the drive shaft. Now, moving forward is the scarier part. Not so much the gear vendor. We kind of come to accept these gear vendors are getting hurt.
But Rick is working on them, and this one has had a lot of passes on it.
And the thing is, it's like Rick said, I'm fixing it this time. And it's going to cost him a ton of money. And he said there's literally this many people that need this gear vendor. So he's going to spend a ton of money. He's been trying to make this one work, but he's going to do a double sprag or something in it. He's got to redo the case and everything. So here's the thing. If it's a gear vendor, there's multiple things that can break in there. One, a shaft. I don't think it was a shaft. That usually when it breaks, it's clean and it doesn't go anywhere. But it could be it rolled the sprag, because Tom Bailey rolled several sprags.
And we've had that happen before.
We have. We had it happen this week.
We did. So, and like the theory there is that like it could have rolled it and like got kind of locked up, and then it's
or it could have broke the sprag and those pieces, and then it locked up, and we haven't engaged the gear vendor, so you don't know.
True.
So it could be that the gear vendor's just trashed. That's fingers crossed. That's what it is, because that's going to get better. And honestly, like we said, there's 5 or 6 of us in the world that needs a gear vendor like Rick's going to build. This gear vendor right here will work for 95% of the people in the world. But okay, moving forward from that, what's left?
Transmission, planetaries.
That's so scary. So $3,800, $3,900 worth of brand new planetaries could be hurt. But we checked the temperature.
Yeah, so check the temperature. Rick always comes through and checks with the temp gun just for comparison. And don't think it's that, because the temperatures weren't crazy. And your
pressures were good.
I was going to say, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not it, but like all the pressures looked good, and driving back, first, second, and third gear felt really solid, really strong. No issues trying to back up or full forward. The only thing that even gave me a little bit of transmission was when I bumped in on that last pass, the car kind of nudged forward just a little.
But it was hot.
So anyways, there's quite the mystery going on.
Whenever that transmission's hot and the fluid cools, gets hot and thins down, it does different stuff. The converter stalls differently. Everything acts different. So the thing with the planetaries, I'm thinking this out as you're talking. You had a good first, second shift on the return road. Yeah. It didn't, so when you go to third, the planetary stopped working. It could be smooth and quiet. Yeah. But in first, if it broke, which is where it would have happened, it would have been really clunky.
The sound that I heard that I keep describing happened the same in the first, second, and third gear. So, but it was only like at certain RPM range, then I'd get it up and it would be smooth and quiet.
Well, my money's on the gear vendor.
Ricky, I'm sorry, but I hope it's the gear vendor.
I hope it is, because we know he's improving that.
Yeah. The rest is expensive and hurts a lot.
Okay, Ricky, though, here is the problem. I thought about this morning. This is the second race, the second drag and drive that we broke a gear vendor on the last pass that kept us from getting an all 6.
Yeah.
2 times now we broke and had to get a 7 on the last
In
day.
Florida every time.
And we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to get another. That was the last pass we could make. I mean, the time was running out. We couldn't have got back in the lanes if the car was not broke.
No.
So it was the last pass on the car. The only good news with that is it wasn't the mid pass, somewhere earlier in the week where.
True. And I'm also really excited about that last pass because even though it was kind of like it was a 7, like it didn't get us our 6, the data that I got from that pass was really exciting because we finally had the car working on a very, very sticky track, and that's really valuable. So
it's very valuable. So we just beat our head against the wall, especially Alex, trying to get this thing down the track, doing all the different stuff that we learned about shock tuning from Ben and everything else, but none of that really worked. It was so extreme.
Yeah.
The track was so flypapered, strictly a radial track, that it didn't matter what we did. You just literally had to take all of its power away.
And like I said earlier, what we ended up doing to it is backwards of what you would think. Like you think radial prep and you think of it just like sucking that tire down and gluing it down, but I was getting like a ton of drive shaft, like wheel speed.
So most people might not realize, and because I talked to some in the pits, they'd come around and say, what happened? Well, when I think the novice racer or the people that don't actually race think, oh, if the track's really sticky, you're really good. You can go out there and hook the car up and go. You don't want a big tire just sticking. You got to have wheel speed. That tire has to outrun the car mile per hour by a little bit to make it work. If it dead hooks that tire, it's just going to wad. You see these dragster tire pictures, they wad up and they just get really distorted. Well, that's what happens. And as soon as it wads up, then all those chunks of wadded rubber just go up in smoke. It just releases. So it's exactly the opposite of what you might think. We just blow the tires off on those super sticky tracks. Schroeder ends. We watched Schroeder ends with his Corvette, and we watched Tom Bailey. Tom Bailey didn't move not half as far as from here to that door. Just up in smoke.
Yeah.
That's why he had to take a 20, I think, that first day, if I remember.
He crossed
right.
the lane, but that was part of it. But the long story short, it's just really interesting because it is opposite of what you would think. Like I was explaining that to other people, but I asked Jason from Mickey Thompson, explain to me why this is happening, and he said, think of like a popsicle for a very rudimentary. It's slippery if it was melting, but it's actually really it's sticky because of the sugar, but it's slippery because of the liquid. So it's kind of a weird way to put it, but just because something's sticky doesn't mean it's not slippery and vice versa.
Yeah, there's a couple different things. Sticky and tight is two different terms. You can go out there, lose your shoes, but the track can be like honey. It'll pull your shoe off, but it's not tight.
Yeah.
When the track's tight and it's got teeth, I mean, you just have to know the difference, but it's two different things, and the car doesn't like that. We can make it get down the track, but it's never going to be the optimum for a big tire car.
No, but that last pass gave me a lot of hope. But anyways, Mr. 55 says he's tired of being on that trailer and he wants to go back to his home on the lift.
Yeah, he's gonna go on. He's gonna go get his examination, his post or pre-op, I guess. Yeah. Pre-op examination.
Look at poor Nolsky in there. That's how we feel, Nolan.
Oh, he's all crooked. He's like, what? What? What was all that you're saying?
What are you saying? Huh?
Nolan, our thoughts are with you. I guess you're going to go get an operation here in a couple days.
You and the 55 both.
Yep. You're right there with the 55. We're going to cut its guts out, though. Maybe yours aren't so bad. Where were they?
They were stuck. They were hanging on the.
I don't really hear it. You hear it now?
It's gonna stop. A hard thud.
And that's in the transmission. I don't hear it.
Okay. It went away just now.
Okay, so the first thing I'm doing, and I can barely see, but I'm looking to see if there's any chance that the flywheel broke in the crankshaft, around the crankshaft, the hub, and I don't see any sign of that, and I don't see any sign of a dent like from the inside out, but I don't expect that. The housing on that converter is really thick. I don't think it would ever do that. I'm just grabbing at straws. So no apparent problems there, but now it's time to drop it and get that converter apart.
It is oily though.
It is very oily.
But we've been noticing that. Also, oh, just look at that.
We've got an oil leak somewhere that we've been fighting this week, and it was dry. That's one of the things in my previous video that I talked about was how dry it was.
Yeah.
But something's decided to leak, so we got to take the top end down and look it over.
Look at this though.
What? That tire. So that's why we couldn't get down the track. Look at that. That's so nasty. If honestly, if you have to have a track that's got that much glue on it, something's not right.
That sucker is glued down. So that was from the last couple passes. Because it has no street miles on it.
You don't see it as bad on them, but usually these tires.
You can see the chunks on them.
Look at this.
Yeah.
So look up through there. It's just got glue stuck all over the tire. Those tires always come back clean, and they're stuck. You can't take a big car down that track. It just doesn't work. So, got it jacked up, got the belly pans off of it, and as like Alex and I talked about, there's that third possibility, or fourth, whatever it is, possibility that the converter could be broken. It kind of adds up and it kind of makes sense, but so the first thing I'm doing is taking the converter loose. I noticed as I was putting my wrench on the converter bolts, let's see if I can demonstrate here. You can see this space. Watch the converter. Come back here. Not the converter, the flywheel. Watch this. See that slop right there? So the first thing I notice is I feel that slop when I take the bolts out. So I look up in there. The flywheel is loose on the crankshaft, which I don't have that problem. Not often anyway. I didn't take the flywheel off during this tear down, but look right here. You can see this bolt. This is crazy. So look right up in there. See that bolt head is not against. Let me see if I can show them. Sorry for the hand in the way. Let's see, right there. Is that going to focus? That bolt head, you can see it right there, right in the center of the screen. It's away from the flywheel. Some reason the motor's not out of balance, so it's not that. It's been run for a long time, same combination. But for some reason, the flywheel's come loose. So that tells me that's the noise that she's hearing. That was the sounded like gravel. Is that when they come loose, it sounds terrible. And so that's the noise she heard. But for some reason, when she went from the 1-2 shifts, and she just now, I talked to her on the phone, she was looking at the data. Transmission pressures show to be good. They stayed steady. There was no problem there. Drive shaft speed did not increase on that pass when she made that shift, which would indicate that the tires just spun, which is possible on that nasty ass track. So the only other thing is like the transmission, for whatever reason, lost its gear on the 1-2 shift, or the gear vendor slipped. So that's where we're at right now, or still possibly the converter. So where I'm at is I just took, let me find my pry bar. I just took all the bolts out of the torque converter to the flywheel. And when I spin this torque converter, see, that torque converter should slide back into the transmission. There it goes. Okay, so that had me worried right there for a minute that the torque converter was hurt or the front pump was hurt. But I think, yeah, what I see there is the torque converter bushing on the end of it that fits into the crankshaft is seized in the crankshaft, and the converter is spinning in that bushing. I'm not sure why that's happening. The bushing may have been a little bit tight for the crankshaft, but so I don't think, see that's spinning fine, no grinding. That's not, the torque converter broke. I think what I was feeling there is just that bushing seizing up. So the noise is the flywheel. That's loose on the crankshaft. But we got to get to the bottom of why it dropped out of gear. So I'm going to drain the gear vendor and see what color the fluid is in the gear vendor. We'll probably have to take the gear vendor down, take it apart. It's a little bit dark, but not real dark. That's still red. I don't feel like it's the gear vendor. See, that's still pretty red.
Yeah.
I see a little something coming out every now and then.
Do you guys want to know something cool?
Yes.
I can't tell the full details, but I just bought a couple things that you're going to want to see.
You get it done?
I got it done.
Can we not? We
things.
can't tell them because this will be out before they get here.
Yeah, I just paid for them though. A couple of them are going to be on their way.
We're really excited about this purchase that she just made. Really excited. You guys are going to be too. It's really, really, really cool. I'm really jealous. But it's kind of like I've got part of it too.
So stay tuned.
Anyway, back to this conglomeration. So it's not this converter. Look up here. See the bushing or the adapter that goes on the end of the converter? It's sticking out of the crankshaft. It kind of seized in the crankshaft and it's spinning on the converter now. That's a problem. That's why I thought the converter was junk, but it's not. But watch this. Let's see, go back this way. You can see how, well, it's kind of hard to show. You can see the bolt actually there. See that?
Oh, yeah.
You can see the bolt is backed out of the crankshaft. Look right there. Why? Oh, I think the flywheel's broke. I see a crack up here.
Show.
I don't know.
It is broke. I can see it. It's on that little arm right there.
Show up in there and see if you can see that.
That's broke.
So the flywheel cracked for whatever reason. Let's see.
Not cool. Oh, look right there. It's busted too. You can see.
Oh yeah, every one of the, all the way
all
through.
the way busted.
So it's the flywheel's broke. Every one of those is broke, but that still doesn't explain why it feels like it went to neutral. I don't know. That's weird because I got to thinking about it. It's like I didn't even touch the flywheel when I had the transmission out. I didn't tighten the bolts up. I looked, and it's on video. My last video, I looked and I said, let's make sure the flywheel's not cracked. And I wiped the streaks off. But look at this oil here. This is the next.
Sus.
This is the next problem.
That's a problem.
It's coming from here. So what I think I'm going to do is clean all this up. I've got this disconnected. I wanted it to be a little freer than that. I want to start the motor and see if I can see where the oil's coming from.
Wow.
I need to know. It's just pouring out of something here. I don't know if it's the adapter for the filter, if it's a filter, or if it's that fitting.
It looks like to me though, like it's coming around this seal right here. Look at how it's got trails down. It's like where that.
But why would it be? It's all up in the block up here.
Well, maybe it's coming from multiple spots, but you can see that it's ran down right there.
Yeah, I don't know. It's leaking somewhere, and it did not have a leak, and it didn't have a broken flywheel either.
Now it does.
Hope it didn't hurt the crankshaft.
That would suck.
I see some signs of damage, but I don't think it'll be all the way. Anyway, so what I'm going to do now is take the transmission out. I think I'm going to drain the fluid.
Okay.
Drain the fluid and see what it looks like. Let's do that real quick. We can get that draining while your mom's got the camera. Let's just have a gander.
Let's take a little look-see.
If the transmission's hurt, we will see that in the fluid. You let that down just a little so you can see. I got an oil filter in there. Okay, what do we think?
Nope.
Look at that, it's like new.
That's not hurt.
There's no way. Just a little bit of fuzz on the drain plug.
It's clear. It's like, I mean, it's see-through. It's red still. It doesn't smell bad.
It doesn't smell burned at
It
all.
smells a little bad,
Well,
but it smells like, smell my hand.
yeah. It's not totally offensive.
Doesn't really smell like clutch. We'll probably end up taking it apart. But if that slipped at 7,500 RPM going down track, it would be burned up. So we're not really learning anything. But anyway, we'll keep you informed.
Okay, transmission is out. What's your thoughts?
Well, I'm trying to figure out what holds that little adapter. I guess it's just swedged on there. That's not a broken bolt, is it?
No.
See this little adapter?
You know what? Is that not a broken bolt?
I'm not sure. Let me get a flashlight and aim up here. I think that thing must just swedge on the converter, which is...
Yeah, that's not a bolt. I don't know.
Yeah, it's got a bolt hole. So that's a 7/16 bolt hole. I got to pull that out. But the main thing is, look at the flywheel.
Shattered.
Look how it's shattered. Every spoke is broken. And that does not make sense. I mean, what had to happen was, let's see what happens here. The converter, the flywheel's loose. Can't even see it there. But I did when I was taking it loose. These bolt holes, if I loosen those up, I think we'll see it where it's wallered the holes out.
It's pretty gnarly.
Wallered.
Shattered.
Wallered them out. That's 3/4, I think. Let me get
That one's the worst crack. Look at that. Huh. It's probably in the trailer. Kinda silly.
Let's see how many pieces we can make a flywheel fall into. See, it's still got Loctite. It's just part of it. It happens, but it sucks.
All right, guys, when you debate one more pass or no more passes, well, sometimes the reason that you don't make another pass during the day is because there's a calculated number of passes, and you just, like Dad said, you don't know what that number is.
Everything has a finite life.
And if we had to get one more pass, we would have been in a bad situation.
Why is that not wanting to come off?
Don't hit yourself in the
It
face.
should just come off, but it's beat back and forth so much.
Well, look at that. Still one piece. You should hang that on the wall.
I mean, it's just...
Hang on, let me click on this and let's get a good... Oh, focus. Hang on, leave it still. There.
Stop hanging me on.
Well, I was actually
I'm trying to think. You know what I think?
What do you think?
I don't think I know.
What do you know? Oh, well, that's not good, is it?
The flex plate, look how flexed
It's warped.
it is.
It is flexed.
So what's happened is when this piece that's stuck in here, seized in the crankshaft. As that flex plate needs to flex, it's pushed, it's bowed it out.
It is very bowed.
That needed to be floating free in there, and it wasn't. So I hope it didn't hurt the pump. I can almost guarantee the pump and the transmission.
Except we have that wear plate, don't we, from Jake?
Nope, it's not in there. For
darn.
some reason, Sonex took that out. So I've got to get a bolt. I think that's 7/16. Let me try one of the flywheel bolts. I don't know why that came off of there. I don't know why it's stuck in here. I think that's the right size. It's got Loctite in it. Let me put that in and let me just turn that by hand.
So you think it's just a coincidence that it spun the tire and busted the flywheel at the same time?
That's a coincidence. This was braking. Hopefully it didn't knock the bearings out of the thrust bearing out of the engine. Okay, see that it moved. It's loose. But when I put this together, this is the different converter.
Yeah.
When I put it together, that was loose. I was able to push it in and out of the crankshaft. That I made sure of. But that's
not moving.
Well, it will. It goes in, but it's like it's seized in there.
Oh, I saw it move right there.
So I got to get a couple pry bars. Got to get that out of there. So it was like it was bottomed out or something, but that didn't work real well. I'm not sure what's the major malfunction here. It's like it's welded in there.
Except it moves in.
It wiggles. See?
Yeah.
Whatever the case is, that's held up. All right, well, I gotta figure out how to get that out, but that's what's happened. So that it was, here's the deal that I know. It wasn't bottomed out in the crankshaft because I pushed the converter both directions and I made the appropriate spacers for the
I remember
flywheel.
you saying that because you couldn't find them.
But the thing is that whatever it was, this seized in the crankshaft, and that, I guess, the pressure from the flywheel, the pump and stuff, the flex plate flexes. That's what it's supposed to do, but it's supposed to come back. Evidently, it pushed and couldn't go any further. It's bowed that flex plate really bad.
So the thing is, and I don't know when you updated them last, but the flex plate was broke, which for the reasons that Dad's talking about now, which was the sound, but we looked at the data and it looks like, which this is really hard to believe, but it looks like at about 3 seconds into the run, which is right around my shift point, shifted the 1-2 shift, 7,500 RPM, it looks like it spun the tire at 3 seconds in, which I have a rev limiter at 8,500, and it hit the rev limiter because like a little bit of spin would get it there. Now, you were explaining why it would feel like neutral.
Because it doesn't look like it. It factually did that.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason we know that is because there's a sensor on the drive shaft at the rear end. If the transmission slipped or the gear vendor slipped for whatever reason, the drive shaft speed would not go up. The engine RPM would go up, drive shaft speed would not. But the data shows that the drive shaft speed increased.
It looks like
10 miles an hour?
Yeah, well, almost 20. It looks like a heart. Well, no, it's 10. It looks like a heartbeat. It's like doo 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 doo. So it was trying to spin.
Well, here's the deal. Your rev limiter, your maximum rev limiter, set at 8,500. You shift at 7,400.
Yeah.
So it takes it to about 75 or 600 before it actually initiates because of the delay in the fluid and what have you. So it's always really close to hitting the rev limiter anyway, within 1,000 RPM. But you will never think about spinning the tires at 300 feet. We never do that. And if you do, it's probably not as bad as this. Look at the back tires, though. They're just like the front tires.
Like
they're just glued.
Yeah.
So that stuff you think is glue, but when it's on the track, it can be slippery, too. So all that glue works really good if you got a tire that's got more pressure in it. And that was, I talked to Ben Strader about this, and he said you might want to try increasing your pressure in your tire, because we have that wadding problem. You're spinning the tire, this tire's turning into this because it's not made to do that. Typically on a track that isn't prepared like this was all the way down, it would just have tire speed, wheel speed. The tire would grow a little bit, spin the tire. This one's chattering. It's like, a bowl of jello.
Yeah.
So what happened was, when you made the 1-2 shift, once it initiated that shift, I believe it spun the tires just a little bit. We don't believe that. We know that
we
for
can
a
see
fact.
it, yeah.
It's in the data. So it spun the tires, and that caused it to hit the rev limiter, and it popped and died. Or basically not died, but it popped out the exhaust.
And then it felt like it was in neutral, but that's because...
The reason for that is you're going 100, and I think the drive shaft speed was around 123 miles an hour.
123, yeah.
At 3 seconds into the run. So at 100 miles an hour in second gear, when it popped, the RPM dropped, you probably lifted your foot off the throttle.
I did, yeah.
So you lift your foot off the throttle. The car is not going to accelerate again until you get the drive shaft speed up to that 123 miles an hour. That it's going to feel like neutral. You're going to give it gas, and it's going to go, there's no holdback in that transmission.
Right.
Like a standard turbo 400. So it basically freewheels until you get up to the RPM where it catches up and it goes down the track again. So you couldn't tell the difference, and it felt like neutral.
And then as soon as I turned out, it was making a lot of noise. So I assume something's broke, but it's actually the flywheel. So it's this weird coincidence of stuff. But that at 3 seconds, the fact of, I was really excited from that pass, because I was like, oh, we can run on this track because I got a really good data. Well, that data shows that, we spun the tire at 3 seconds in,
Well, look at this. So you can run on this glued down track. That's the most horrible, disgusting thing I've ever seen. That tire, the only way to get that nasty glue off of there is to wear it off. You can't scrape that off.
No, it is that's...
Both of these tires are covered with glue, and that's just off of the track right there. So the back tires are as well. As far as I'm concerned, those tires are basically junk now. They look horrible.
Yeah.
You got to wear that off. So that's that radial prep stuff, and this, as the radial haters call it, that's a rag or a big floppy. It flops. It's fine if the track can, if we're on a street or an NHRA track or anywhere in the world except a radial prep track, these tires are better. They go down the track. They can have wheel speed and they expand, like you see dragsters. They're up on the tire.
Mm-hmm.
That tire's grown 6 inches. Well, you can't do that if that gluey conglomeration of snot and sticky, it's like honey, is wadding that tire up. So as soon as it wadded that tire up and shook it, it chattered it, so to speak, and that's when the rev limiter hit max rev limit. So that's a problem in itself. So how are you ever going to make this car go down a track like that?
The bad part is you just have to pull power, which unfortunately means it's going to be slower than you want it to be.
I'm not into racing for pulling power. We've always added power. That's what we want to do, is go faster. If you got to pull power, you're racing bracket races and stuff. And that's not my thing. So we
Fair
just
enough.
can't go back to a radial prep track. It just doesn't work for our big tire. I don't care that they have their radial prep. That's fine. We just don't have a place there.
But on a positive note, it doesn't initially look like there's too much physical damage to anything Dad's still going to take down. You're still going to take the transmission apart, check stuff, right?
I'm going to take it apart and check it, because it could have damaged the front pump and it could have damaged the thrust in the engine. If this is stuck in here and that converter's pushing against it, it's pushing a lot of pressure on that thrust.
Yeah.
So if it hurt the thrust, let's just do a little experiment here. And I pray
Should have
this isn't a problem.
7 thousandths or so.
Yeah. So I just felt a little bit. Fortunately, not too much. So watch that move as I do it. That's got just a...
That's a
That's
smidge.
like
I didn't even
10,000
hardly
or
see
something.
that.
That's not enough. So thankfully, that shows that it didn't just wear the thrust into the crankshaft. I'm not worried about the bearings. We're going to replace those. But if it wears on that thrust collar on the back of that crankshaft, it could ruin the crank.
Right.
But it didn't.
Well,
So
that's good.
it did just all it did is it, but you can see it bowed that flywheel.
Yeah.
So that shows it's not a faulty flywheel. It's not a bad job. TCI didn't ruin it, make a bad flywheel. It's just this snout of this, the converter is stuck in there. I'm going to tap, that's got a 7/16 hole. I remember how this worked. That mark there is you put a bolt in and you tighten it up and it pops off. That's a wedge fit. It shouldn't be any issue, but for whatever reason it's seized in the crankshaft. It must have been just a little bit tight. And I'm going to take that thread and I'm going to put a long bolt in there and push it out of here.
Nice. Okay.
So everything should be okay, except, you know, we're going to check everything out. I got to take that pan down, figure out where the oil leak's at, and we'll look at the bearings and decide if we want to do rods or whatever. But it's not as bad as we thought.
No.
That's the noise. That goober stuff on the tires is what caused it to pop at 300 feet out.
And Ricky, you get off the hook for this one.
Yeah, I don't think the gear vendor hurt. The fluid's a little bit dark, so we may send it to Rick and let him look at it.
He said he would like to see it regardless, but because it's been through drag week, it's had a lot of, didn't do testing, but it had other testing. But basically, it doesn't look like it's not the culprit. We know that. So
the drive shaft, if you notice, it's still phased. It's still fine. Our QA1 drive shaft's just a little badass.
We have a little bit of a joke with Rick that when Dad passes, because Rick and Dad fight like cats and dogs. Yep. And you listen to them talk when they're having a good conversation, and they still sound like they're fighting because that's just how they communicate. And so I told Rick a while back, I was like, yeah, Rick, every time Dad passes a car on the freeway, clicks overdrive in, you get 1 Rick point. But the problem is 10 Rick points still puts him at -10. So
every time we heard a gear vendor, he goes negative, 20 or something like that. So it's hard for Rick to get on top.
The other day,
we didn't hurt a gear vendor.
We didn't. So he gets a couple. Maybe we'll give him 5 Rick points.
Yeah, Rick's good and the gear vendor's good. I just like to argue with him.
I actually have to say, the other day I had somebody ask me, why do you choose to run a gear vendor if you break them? And I said I wouldn't race without the gear vendor. I wouldn't do a drag and drive without a gear vendor because it has that much benefit.
So when we were thinking about what could be wrong, I'm thinking, I pray that 10-inch gear is not a problem. This Turbo 400, if those new planetaries already took a dump, then that's a big problem. So it's like, okay, the least problem, the lesser of the things would be the gear vendor. We can get that fixed cheaper and easier. But it's like, if we can't break a gear vendor every week,
no,
it's hard on the motor. When you shift a second and it zings to the chip, that's really hard on valve train and stretches rods. So it was really bothering me. I'm thinking we could take that gear vendor back out, and then it's like, because to drive 65 when trucks are passing you, we have Volkswagens passing us.
That really got to him.
It does, and I love Volkswagens, but it's like Volkswagen should never pass this car. So, on the freeway.
Yeah.
So we're driving and Nick's back there overheating and no gear vendor and his motor's revving to the moon. It's like, that sucks.
Yeah.
So once we got to where we clicked that gear vendor and RPM goes brrr.
Yeah, gear vendor, totally worth it. And like Dad said earlier, there's like very few cars out there. The average person in car with the gear vendor isn't going to have the issues that we're facing, but this dude's heavy. And he's launching hard.
And he's making steam.
He is making some power. I did a power wheelie. That was cool. Yeah, that was cool.
You had the front wheels hiked off the ground at half track. We should expect that out of these pro mods, but
not out of this guy.
This thing's normally so docile.
Yeah.
But when you put all that snot, look at the snot on that tire. I just can't get over it. This tire is junk.
Yeah,
I can't stand to look at that.
I can go do burnout.
That's all, and you're gonna burn it. You're gonna clean the snot off from there to there. The front ones, all you can do is drive for 50 miles. It's recapped now.
Yeah.
And that snot's getting harder and harder.
It's hardening up.
Yeah,
anyways, okay. Well, that's a positive. I think everything's kind of a positive here. So.
Yeah, we're good.
Cool.
Okay, so I'm going to make this a 2-part deal. It's probably going to be 3 parts by the time we put everything back together, because I'll show you what's going on in the transmission, make sure nothing's bad there. We'll get the pan down. We'll let you know what we're going to do inside there. But first, I'm going to get this whatever, this pilot pulled out of here, and then I'll take the transmission apart. But until the next time, I guess that'll be it for this episode. We'll just end it here because this is probably a 45-minute video.
Oh, it's more than that. We talk a lot. You put the two of us together.
This is an educational video. So I talked to Ben Strader about that today. What did he call it? He said he has a, so it's not entertainment, it's edutainment or something like that.
Edutainment.
So we give you a little bit of education and a little bit of entertainment mixed together. And this isn't necessarily entertaining unless you look at Alex. Turn the phone around.
So I look weird.
See, that's entertaining.
That's not nice. You look like a horror movie right now with this light casting on you.
I
There.
probably do.
Look at me this way.
I look like a scary person anyway. All the
Okay,
time.
man, that is kind of creepy. All right, so with that said, I think you can probably close it out here. That's actually really creepy.
I'm scary. All right, yeah, that's it. So that's it for this time. As always, go fast, stay grumpy, and be bitchin'. We'll see you next time.
Hey now.